And I said to the kid, I said, "You're my hero for not doing anything." And that was the first time that I realized that I had actually forgiven myself for what had happened. It was just a really profound moment in my life that helped me understand what forgiveness, really was.
Welcome to the Pave Your Paradise podcast. I'm Mandy Ross, international media personality, speaker, writer, life cheerleader, and coach. Each episode, I'll share a guest or an idea to help you blast through your limiting beliefs, nourish your soul, and connect with yourself to take your relationships, health, business, and life to a next level. We don't play small. We're meant for great things. We take our struggles and turn them into slam dunk successes. This is the place for you to create your best you so you can pave your personal path to paradise. Are you with me? Let's do this. Hello and welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in to Pave Your Paradise podcast. I feel happy and grateful to have you joining me. If you're new here, I'm Mandy Ross, host of this amazing space for you to uplevel your relationships, your health, your business, and your life. And I'd love to know how you're feeling today. What's on your heart and mind? Send me what has you feeling stuck and what topics you want me to cover on the podcast, and also which episodes you absolutely love. I create these episodes to try and help you guys, so I'd love your feedback. Please let me know by sharing on your posts and stories and tagging me at Mandy J. Ross and at Pave Your Paradise. I feel excited to have a Patreon page and feel thrilled to serve you even more through it. If you want tips, techniques, and tools for your personal development toolbox to connect with me for online yoga, meditation, and coaching, plus be supporting my mission to uplift others through my podcast, YouTube videos, and content, please visit www.patreon.com/MandyJRoss. Boom! And now I feel thrilled to feature a very special guest, Theo Fleury. Theo is an NHL Stanley Cup champion, Olympic gold medalist, World Cup junior champion, and expert in the field of relational trauma. Many of you have reached out about relationships, trauma, and how to be a champion in your life, and I'm so happy to bring you a leading expert on these. And y'all know how passionate I feel about radical transformation and being your own life cheerleader. Theo Fleury is best known for his time on the ice, but off the rink, his life once carried the markings of a troubled childhood, abuse, and coping with emotional pain through addictive and self-destructive behaviors. Today, Theo defines himself as a victor over trauma and addiction and a facilitator to those still trying to find their way. He has 2 best-selling books, Playing with Fire and Conversations with a Rattlesnake. He has been awarded the Canadian Humanitarian Award and the Queen's Jubilee Medallion. He also holds 2 honorary doctorates. Theo is now a healthy, motivational, and successful agent of change. He's skillfully adept at inviting audience self-reflection during his many speaking events by creating safe environments for guests to share their own Me Too experiences. Without controversy or blame, Theo focuses on helping and leading others down a path of healing. Theo resides in Calgary, Alberta, and is a husband and father. So, Theo is an NHL legend and Stanley Cup champ, entrepreneur, a relational trauma expert, speaker, humanitarian, and so much more. We connected originally in Vancouver a number of years ago when I interviewed him on camera for an NHL segment. Our interaction left me feeling intrigued as he was making a name for himself in the world of self-development, and I had a hunch it wouldn't be the last time we would cross paths. Watching his journey and transformation into the catalyst of positive change, hope, and inspiration he is today, I knew I had to have him on the show for you. Because of his background and own personal journey of continually and successfully reinventing and evolving himself, he's full of insight and inspiration. He's someone who I completely appreciate and respect for what he's creating in this world. His approach to life and words of wisdom are powerfully impactful, so I had to share him with you. I want to continue bringing on expert guests that will help you, inspire you, and empower you. And Theo Fleury is a breathing, living, walking example of paving your own path to paradise. We dive deep in this episode on his journey of being a victim to victor over his childhood abuse, trauma, and addictions, his transition out of pro hockey and reinventing himself time and time again, how you can radically change your life by adopting a few simple habits, learning to surrender and to forgive, the importance of connection and conversation for transformation, how to turn your personal pain into purposeful power, living authentically, unapologetically, and creating your own path to freedom, and so many other inspiring topics. So I hope y'all enjoy this interview as much as I did with Theo Fleury. All right, everyone, I am so excited to have NHL legend Theo Fleury joining me on Pave Your Paradise podcast today. Theo, how are you feeling today?
Well, pretty good considering what's going on in the world right now,
Let's dive into that topic. How are you feeling with what is going on in the world, this this pandemic we're dealing with right now? How are you processing this all?
Well, it's an interesting time to, I guess, be alive in the world. And, my wife and I started self-isolating, last week already. So, we're just trying to watch as much of the updates as we can and, wash your hands and, just stay away from as many people as you can.
Absolutely. And you are definitely no stranger to things being thrown at you in your life. Let's dive into some of these things. So just for anyone listening out there, you played in the NHL for 14 years. For 11 of those, you were on the Calgary Flames. You're Stanley Cup champion, which was the first for Calgary, Olympic gold medalist, World Cup junior champ. You are also author of the best-selling book, Play with Fire, country musician, entrepreneur. I mean, you've obviously best been known for your time on the ice, but you have now transformed all of your experiences in your lifetime with trauma and addiction to now be a motivational speaker and facilitator for those trying to find their way and an expert in the field of relational trauma. And I mean, watching and knowing of your journey, Theo, I mean, it feels like to me as though you've lived 10 different lifetimes in such a short amount of time on this planet. And now to have evolved and transformed really into this catalyst of positive change and hope and inspiration and help, it is honestly such an absolute pleasure to have you joining me on this show.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I think, when I left the game, I wanted to get as far away from the game as possible because I thought that I could maybe have a bigger impact, after playing the game. And, obviously I had some issues at the end of my career, which basically, took me out of the game. And, from there I was able to, find the courage and the strength to, to write the book, Playing with Fire. And then, going out on this book tour with, very little expectation. I didn't think anybody was going to, read the book, but, what I quickly discovered was that what happened to me isn't uncommon, and it is actually the human experience. And so, I went across Canada and, 5, 10, 20 people were coming up at every book signing saying, "Hey man, I read your book and, you told my story, me too." And, and so that was 2009, it's 2020 now, and that hasn't stopped. And
yeah,
I actually think that it's gotten, more robust and more people are finding the courage and the strength to speak, these words that they've held very tightly to their chest for many, many years. And, it's allowed them to choose a path of healing and get on a path of healing. And I've been that person that has been there for these people and allowed them to get rid of these secrets that they've been carrying around. So uh, it was totally unexpected. I had
Hmm.
no, all I was trying to do was tell my story so that I could move on with the rest of my life. But what happened is I was sort of plunked into this epidemic, and it's been, like I said, it's been rewarding, it's been inspiring, it's been incredible to be that person that people seek out that need to get this stuff off their chest.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, you are just so full of so much wisdom, and there's so many things that I'd love to discuss with you today on the show because first and foremost, I love your philosophy around connection plus conversation equals personal transformation. I'm the same in feeling that way, as though communication and connection, those two, when you put those together, that really can lead to such personal transformation. So I want to talk about that. Now, I just want to say for the record, I came up with a name for you. I think, Theo, you are the king of evolutionary experiences.
Well, I appreciate that, but it was not planned. Let me tell you. It was. I think it was very selfish at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was going to move past this and do something completely different. But what happened is I really found the true purpose for my life, and that was to be this agent of change and just talk about things that are difficult to talk about that we don't necessarily uh, want to talk about, and the reason why it is at such epidemic proportions is that we have not created a safe space in society yet where we can openly talk about these things, and that's why we see
Mm.
mental health uh, still has so much stigma attached to it. And what I find interesting is we have the highest awareness
Yeah.
in the history of our planet around mental illness and all that stuff. But on the other side of the coin, we have the highest suicide rates in the history of our planet. And so why isn't all this awareness being turned into action and getting people well? Well, it's because we haven't created the safe space. And I think that and the safe space is allowing people to disclose to the world that they have some sort of trauma history, in their timeline.
Yeah, I've seen this too, like being that, I definitely work in different industries, one being the self-development world. And I agree. I think there's such a need right now for allowing those safe spaces where people can openly share and literally speak up and open up because that process in itself, and I'm speaking personally now from my own experience, just being able to share your story is so powerful in the healing journey.
Yeah, it's like the most essential thing that when you put a voice to your pain and suffering, it's no longer you know trapped in your body. It's no longer trapped in your DNA. It's no longer trapped in
Hmm.
your cells, and it's like a huge
Weight.
release.
It's such a
Y-
weight, right? Lifted
Yeah,
off of you.
yeah, because I'm 52 years old, and I grew up in the old military school of teaching and coaching and stuff, and so that no longer works anymore, and
Hmm.
so all of us who grew up in the suck it up era are now the ones who are struggling the most with, you know, all of these things, mental illness and addiction issues and all that is because we weren't allowed to talk about sadness and, fear and all these things. And so, you know, that's the safe space that I'm talking about creating, is that, we got to be able to talk about whatever we want. And, social media has not been very friendly to creating relationship. And so, I call it social insanity, not social media.
Hmm. Why is that? Like, what can you explain why? Like, where the reasoning behind that name comes from?
Well, I grew up on the prairies, and so every single home had a pot of coffee or a bottle of whiskey on the table where you could just show up unannounced and, sit around and have these incredible conversations. And that doesn't happen anymore.
Mm,
And to me, the most effective and cheapest type of therapy on the planet is group therapy.
mm.
And when you get a bunch of people in a room and you use vulnerability to create safety, and then once you have safety in the room, that's when the magic of healing happens. It's not rocket science. It's very basic relationship stuff.
Absolutely. The power, again, you and I are so in tune in that way. The power of connection and conversation. I mean, that's actually how you and I originally met. Just for those people listening out there who are wondering, I actually met you, Theo. I think it was actually about 10 years ago when I just had started my TV career and I got to interview you. And there was something about your energy that really stood out to me. And I think it had been, yeah, that would make sense time wise too. It was a little bit after you had published your book.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember getting this sense of like, okay, there's something far beyond the surface with this guy I need to dive into. And we didn't have the chance during that TV interview, but lo and behold, a number of years later, we get to connect. And now you're doing such profound work in the world, even more so than back then. So I'm really happy that we get to share with everyone what you've been up to.
Yeah.
You're such a server. You're such a beautiful spirit on this planet who gives so much. So I want people to actually get to know you a little bit more too personally, to connect with you through communication. Theo, what
Mm-hmm.
was the first thing you did when you woke up this morning?
What did I do? Oh, I went to laser therapy. So I did some self care today for myself. So because of my hockey career, I
Mm-hmm.
have all of these lingering injuries from playing the way that I played. And so I've had a lot of um, issues physically over the last probably three years, I guess.
Mm,
And the healing process is a three-step process, right? It's physical, emotional, and spiritual. And so I worked on the emotional part first, then I sort of transitioned into spirituality, the second part, and sort of neglected my physical being. And so, the last 3 years, my physical body has been saying, hey, like, what about this vessel that you live in? And so, I've really spent a lot of time in the last probably year trying to, get my physical being up to par with the emotional and spiritual stuff.
well, speaking of that, what are some of the daily habits then that you swear by for success? That could be physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual.
Mm. Yeah, I have a daily routine. Probably the first thing I do when I wake up is I pray and meditate, start my day, and then I grab a coffee and then go about my day doing. I do tons of these podcasts. I have my own podcast, and then obviously I am traveling once a week to speak to some group, somewhere in North America.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I've seen the ramp up of that throughout the years. And I mean, obviously not when we're recording this podcast, you're not doing any traveling right now.
No, no,
Hopefully
no,
soon again. Hopefully soon again.
there is,
I'm
yes.
really curious
So,
to you, what gets you up in the morning aside from work? Like what is that fire within you that really gets you to jump out of bed?
mm, let's see. So September 18th of 2005, I hit my knees in a washroom and I surrendered. And that was the last day I had a drink or a drug. And, from that, moment that I surrendered, I was working towards not only healing, but I was also working towards purpose. And so what I discovered is that, my purpose is to try and help one person every single day, you know, uh, get on a path of healing some way, somehow. And so, that's ultimately what gets me out of bed every day is looking for that one opportunity to help somebody, choose that new path.
Wow. I love that you just shared that. Oh man, what an amazing intentionality to start. Like every single person listening out there, if every single one of us had that intention at the beginning of our day to just change or to help one person that they come across, whether it's on social media or in person, I mean, our world would be a different place, Theo.
Ultimately, why are you here? Right? That's the question. Why? And when I look back at my life, you know, I look at my parents who, you know, both struggled with addiction as a kid, and me growing up didn't even know, that was my first sort of traumatic experience, right? And then trying
Mm-hmm.
to make sense of that, and then trying to make sense of my sexual abuse, right? And what I discovered
Mm-hmm.
was, these certain events that happen in your life prepare you for something bigger down the road. And so, I see my parents as a gift. I see my abuser as a gift, because without those experiences, I'm not talking to you today, Mandy, about this subject, because if I don't have the experience, you know, I, I can't really talk about it. And so when you make sense of, why did I go through all this pain and suffering? Why did this happen to me? And then once you start unpacking and peeling the layers of the onion off, and you realize that, pain, whether that's emotional, physical, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, that pain is always a great motivator for change. And I always advise people, when you're in pain, that's the universe telling you that this is an opportunity for you to grow. This is an opportunity for you to learn something from, this pain and suffering that we're experiencing.
Oh, definitely. There's so much that you just said that I can resonate with, and I'm sure people listening out there can as well. I mean, I think the majority of people have not been absent of some sort of trauma, especially in their childhood. And, myself, I could really resonate with you. Into today's modern time, my both of my parents are two of my best friends. But growing up, they both did struggle with addictions at different times. So for me to have to process that, as you had talked about as well, to make sense of that. At the time, obviously, I didn't understand what was going on when I was so young. But now looking back and reflecting on it, I realized those things happened for, not to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big differentiating factor in being able to grow in life. Like, if you can distinctly say this happened for my evolution rather than this happened to me as a
Mm-hmm.
victim, then you actually are more in control and you take power
Yeah,
back.
and that's the process, right? Is that, once you get your power back, once you understand, then the world becomes your oyster. And ultimately, why are we here? Well, we weren't put on this earth to suffer in silence. We were put on this earth to be in relationship with one another and help each other get through the most difficult times in our life. And so, um, we have a huge lack of compassion in the world. We are
Yes.
always so quick to judge and so quick to point the finger, but what you don't realize is you're outing yourself when you do that, because when you're pointing the finger at somebody else, that means that I don't really want to look at myself, and it's easy for me to judge you than it is for me to unpack my own trauma history and understand why I'm being triggered by your behavior.
You are so wise, Theo. You are so wise. I love it. It's really beautiful to hear you be able to share so openly and candidly because I think so many people are living in fear of sharing their story. So, first off, just thank you for your courage to be able to share so openly with everyone. And for those who might not know I said kind of the highlight version of what you've accomplished in your life, which is nothing short of just, amazing to say the least. If you would just share a little bit about your background and your story with my
Mm,
audience, just coming from your perspective, anything you want to share.
yeah. Well, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a home where both my parents experienced childhood trauma in their life, and then that manifested itself into addiction as adults. My dad was a alcoholic, and my mom was a prescription pill addict, and so I grew up in chaos and violence, and just it was insane, pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then as a very young child, I discovered hockey as an escape from not having to be, in that situation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, I basically lived at the rink, the majority of my childhood, or a baseball field or a gymnasium or whatever it was. And so, I became this phenom hockey player. And, as I was getting older, scouts would come to watch me play. And when I was 14, I was a part of the very first bantam draft that was held in the Western Hockey League. And I was picked in the second round by the Winnipeg Warriors, who are now the Moose Jaw Warriors. And so the summer after I was drafted, the guy that drafted me came to my house and basically told my parents that I needed better coaching, better competition, and probably be a good idea that I moved to Winnipeg. And so my parents obviously knew what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be, and so they didn't hold me back. And needless to say, that decision and choice would change me for the rest of my life, because over the next 2.5 years, this coach and this scout that drafted me, he raped me 150 times over a 2.5 year period. And so, what I was left with was a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. And so I carried this secret around for a long time. And it wasn't too long after that that I found, alcohol, drugs, and, gambling and sex and food addiction as a way of coping with this, emotional pain that was left behind from these two experiences. And what we know about addiction is your addiction never gets better. It gets worse and worse and worse. And then you start adding, hard drugs and, all kinds of other things. And then eventually, you get to that place where you got to make a choice and you got to make a decision. And, 16 years ago, I had a fully loaded pistol in my mouth, ready to pull the trigger and end my life, not because I wanted to die, but because I was exhausted from living in emotional pain and suffering, and had tried everything on the planet to get rid of this feeling. And then September 18th, 2005, like I said, I surrendered and turned my will and my life over to the care of the universe. And that started this whole amazing journey of, self-reflection and healing and all these amazing things that have happened in my life post hockey career.
Oh man, Theo, I just want to say bless you and bless your heart and soul for just sharing that. It really pays to be brave, and you are such a bright light on this planet. For everyone listening out there, I'm sure we're all feeling the same vibration. You're such a high vibing soul, and for you to be able to share your story again so openly after what you've gone through and growing through, it really is a miracle. It really is a miracle.
Well, and when I talk about surrender, that's part of the process. Is what I realized was I can't do this by myself. You can't do this by yourself. Nobody can do this by themselves.
Yeah.
Because, I always say, left to my own defenses, left to me running my own life is the biggest shit show on the planet when I'm running my own life. And
Yeah.
when I'm driving the bus always crashes. And so September 18th, 2005, I got into the passenger seat and I gave up that control and I turned it over to something, greater than myself. And the day that I did that, my life changed immediately because I was, I finally had trust. I finally had, all these things that as a kid I was taught not to trust. I was, you know, and all these things, and abandonment and not good enough and not lovable. These things became, you know, part of my DNA and part of how I felt about myself. And so, you know, I really had to sit down and have a relationship with myself for the very first time in my life. And so, and what I always tell people is, after my abuser left my life, I took over the abuse of myself because, I always felt
Mm.
abandoned and I didn't feel good enough and I didn't feel lovable. And so I had to change and rewire, my brain. And the only way you can do that is, by, putting a full stop to all these coping mechanisms and then really take a look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm better than this and I'm better than what I'm showing the world, and I need to make changes. And those changes were slow and they were part of the process because baby steps are way more important than leaps and bounds. And so that has been the process, is that I do like myself, I do take care of myself. I have amazing friendships, I have amazing relationships in my life now that I didn't have before, because I always went into every relationship holding two fists up in the air because I was afraid and I didn't want to get hurt again. And so I've been able to sort of sift through all of these uh, things in my life and get to a place of peace and joy and happiness and love, and all these things that are really important, that before I was just basically surviving and numbing out the emotional pain, and really wasn't living up to my full potential. And the real reason, I guess, that I was put on this planet and why I had those experiences is because I had to figure it out.
Yeah. Seriously, king of evolutionary experiences. I'm going to keep calling you that because really everything you just shared there. Oh, there's so much I want to dive into even deeper. But one thing that you said, I think I've never heard anyone articulate it like that, but it's so beautifully said by you, which was once your abuser left the picture, you then took over being the abuser to yourself. And to make that connection alone is so profound in someone's healing journey, because for most people it is really that pattern, right? Like they go from being the victim, and then they actually they turn to these numbing things, they turn to these distractions outside of themselves to, and usually it's very abusive towards themselves. So it's like to actually be able to step outside of yourself for that, to be able to be aware of that in the first place. I mean, that's a huge, huge shift in consciousness in your own healing journey and
Yeah,
process.
no question. And then then you need to allow the universe to now present these lessons in your life, because you're no longer numbed out. You're actually present and you're actually attuned, to your surroundings, as opposed to running away from them constantly, day in and day out. And so, once you, do that surrender process, then that allows the universe now to present these lessons that you essentially need to learn, so that you can, fully embrace them and fully embrace who you are, as a human being, so that you can, move forward and not live constantly and continuously, in your trauma. And another
Totally.
and another thing
Totally.
and another thing about addictions is I hate the word addiction because it has
Mm-hmm.
so much shame attached to it, right? I've changed the word addiction to something else. I call it emotional pain management is what it is.
Ooh, emotional pain management.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I just even feel the energy around that. It's such a more appropriate term for that.
Yeah, because it allows you to look at that person in a different way. Is that, they're not a screw up. They're not, you know what I mean? Like they're in pain.
Hmm.
That person is in pain and they're suffering.
Well, it's like the adage that goes, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
you know? And I know,
Hmm.
like, I consider myself a life cheerleader. People always hear me, everyone listening out there right now knows I call myself a life cheerleader, but it really goes back to being your own life cheerleader. Like when you're describing that story, of your personal journey and, the tragedy to triumph that you experienced, you had to ultimately be your own cheerleader.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like and for those of us who've experienced trauma, that's a really, really hard process to articulate and to embrace, is because, you know, we don't know when the next time it is that somebody is going to traumatize us. And so that, once we, break through that wall and realize that we are in control of, these people in our life by setting healthy boundaries, you know.
You said one of my favorite B words.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
boundaries.
yeah. It truly is a process. And,
Yes.
you know, you cannot be hard on yourself when you're in healing, right? Some days you're going to feel amazing with the pink clouds, the unicorns, the rainbows, all that stuff. But, eventually, that's going to go away. And then you're going to have another lesson in front of you that you need to learn from. And so, I always tell people, patience in the healing process is probably, the greatest virtue that you can have, is that, this isn't going to happen overnight. That,
Yes.
heal. I always say to people, I'm in therapy for the rest of my life.
Yes. That's a
And,
that's a really beautiful way to look at it.
and I'm completely okay with that, because every time I go into a therapeutic process, I get better. Oh my God, what a concept, you know. But
Completely.
we've been taught that, you know, there is this, this magic pill that we can take that, makes everything go away. Well, no, that's just a band-aid solution, you know, that yeah, is a temporary relief, but
Yes.
eventually, you got to get to the root and the core and the cause of your pain and suffering. And I'm big proponent for holistic healing when it comes to, mental health issues. I don't
Yes. And
I
what do you,
don't
so when you say
I
like
don't I
holistic,
don't
like what does that mean for people listening out there? What would that look like to you?
well, it's about relationship, right? Is that the more brave we are, uh, putting ourselves in healthy and healing relationships,
And being vulnerable, you mean?
yeah, yeah, that's how we heal, right? And so whether that's, your yoga master, or, you do some breathing, or you do some meditation, or exercise, or eating well, or, whatever it is, you choose. Not all this works for everybody, but, you know,
I like
uh,
to think of them all as like having them in a toolbox of
yeah,
healing
hmm,
techniques,
yeah,
and each person, their toolbox is going to be filled with different tools.
yeah. And so when it comes to general, mental health stuff, like general anxiety, general depression, all that stuff. That you don't need, to take synthetic brain chemistry to help you. There's lots of different ways to produce your own amazing brain chemistry that's going to help you, when you're depressed or when you're anxious or, whatever it is you're facing. There's lots of really cool practices out there that will help you alleviate some of that. And then the more that you do them, the more it becomes part of your chemistry, your DNA, all that stuff. And then, I used to have 20, let's say I used to have hour-long panic attacks, right?
Yeah.
Now they're 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that there's two things of everything you said that I really want to touch on because I think they're so important for people to hear out there. One is the concept of even though, like, I would consider you and I, it sounds like anyways, and just knowing your story and all the different, like we're talking about healing right now. I know I've done so many different techniques out there on healing and I've evolved over the years as I know you have as well. And I think for people to listen, who are listening out there, to know that you might be really, really far and you've grown so much on your healing journey, but you're still going to be in situations where you have to be vulnerable and you're going to, have downtimes and you're going to trip up and things are going to happen that aren't ideal. And to not get stuck on those times and to be able to have compassion first and foremost for yourself, to not let that one thing that happens spiral you all the way back to ground zero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so that's why I say patience is important because like I said, healing is for the rest of your life. It's not
like a staircase. It's not like you just go one step and then you're there forever and then the next step and
because when you're in relationship, not all relationships are going to be, great. But the reason why that person comes into your life is because there's something in you that they have that you need to learn from.
Totally. I love your philosophy because it really is the same when you think about it. Like, I always like to think, and maybe you're the same way, I feel like you would be with what you just said, is just every person, every situation, everything that comes up in your life is happening for you in order for you to evolve to a higher version of yourself.
Yes, there's no question. Like when I speak to young coaches all the time, I always say to them, your job and your role is to learn more from the kids that you're teaching than you can teach them, because that gets the ego out of the way and it gets you on their level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
children are honestly some of the best teachers at the most common basic things in life. I think children, and I also think animals. I think those two can be some of the greatest teachers.
There's no question. And I'll tell you a great story. So as I was writing the second book, I wrote it with a lady named Kim Barthel, and she's a neuroscientist. And early on in the process of our relationship, she asked me how I felt about forgiveness. And, I quickly was, saying, no, I don't want to go down that road. Why do I need to go down that road? All this stuff. And she said, stop right there. She goes, forgiveness is not an action. It's a feeling. And she said, all I want you to do is think about forgiveness. And I was like, okay, I can think about that. It's easy to do. I can think about forgiveness. So what was it, about 9 years ago, or maybe less than that. Anyways, we set this intention that we wanted to start to go work in the prison system in Canada. And so that has come to fruition. And I've been to 25 different prisons. So we show up one day at a place called Stony Mountain Penitentiary, which is an hour outside of Winnipeg, and it is a maximum, medium, and minimum security prison. And so we're in there, and we have 400 of the baddest dudes on the planet in our audience. Murderers, rapists, child molesters, bank robbers, you name it. They're all in our audience. And, what I quickly realized is that, I have 15 layers of trauma in my history. And these guys have like 40, 50, 60, 70 layers of trauma in their story.
Yeah.
And so we're having this amazing conversation with these, inmates. And so I look out into the audience and I look, and there's a guy sitting way in the back of the room, like last row, and he can't even sit in his chair. He's so fired up. So I call on him, and the kid stands up, and he looks exactly like Eminem, the rapper. So he's got the flat beat cap and tattoos from his neck all the way down to his feet. He's got that sort of hip hop vibe, and he's kind of this cool dude. And so the first thing out of his mouth, he says, Theo Fleury says, "You're my hero." And I was like, wow, like we're in prison here. This is kind of interesting. And so he says, as you can see, he says, "I'm not the biggest guy in the world." And he said, "I used to be a really great hockey player." And he said, "When I was 14 years old, I got involved with the wrong crowd. I started selling drugs." And he said, "I've been in and out of jail ever since." And then he says, "You'll never guess who I was with 3 weeks ago in Grand Cache, Alberta." I go, "I don't know. Who were you with?" And he said, "I was with Graham James, the guy that abused me."
Wow.
He was in jail. He was in jail with my abuser. And he said, "Theo Fleury, because you're my hero," he said, "my sole intent while I was in that prison was I was going to beat the shit out of this guy for you." But he said, "Graham is very heavily guarded because everybody wants to beat the shit out of this guy." So he said,
Yeah.
"I waited and I waited and I waited." And he said, "I got my chance." He said, "The guards left his room and I walked into his room and he wasn't there. So I started searching around." He said, "I went to the left side of the bed. He wasn't there." He said, "I walked over to the right side of the bed and there he was, curled up in a ball in the fetal position in the corner of his room." And the kid said, "I didn't do anything." And I said to the kid, I said, "You're my hero for not doing anything." And that was the first time that I realized that I had actually forgiven myself for what had happened. And when somebody's curled up in a ball in the fetal position in the corner of a room, that person is in pain and that person is suffering. And guess what? I'm not. Like, I'm in a prison talking to 400 guys about how to try and help them heal from their own past traumas. And so, it was just a really profound moment in my life that helped me understand what forgiveness, really was. And I needed to get there. And so I always say, the two greatest lessons that I've learned in my life have come in the prison system, because the first thing they taught me was compassion. And then the second thing they taught me was forgiveness.
Wow, Theo. I literally feel like chills up and down like my body right now from you sharing that. I just had this word flash into my head, and this philosophy, forgiveness is ultimately freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Forgiveness is freedom, and you are free now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
It was an amazing feeling. Like, and what was interesting, as those words came out of my mouth, like, "You're my hero," like I wanted to take them back,
Wow.
because I don't know where they came from, but they just came.
I feel like it was source flowing through you. You know, those
Yeah.
moments, it literally was
Yeah.
those come to Jesus kind of life-changing,
Yeah.
defining moments,
Mm-hmm.
and source was like, this is what you need to speak right now. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. I'm so grateful you shared that. Wow.
Yeah. It's always a story that, you know, I think really puts this whole process into its ultimate perspective,
Yeah.
right? Because um, I never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd ever get to forgiveness in my whole entire life.
Yeah.
Because I really wasn't thinking about it, right? The seed was planted by Kim, but I was still not really a willing participant, right? I was still fighting it, and so it took me going to this, the ultimate in willingness, right?
Yeah.
That's the only thing
Surrender.
I
You
pray.
said it already, the S word, like
Yeah,
surrendering
yeah,
to it
yeah,
finally.
yeah.
I'm very curious as to after that life defining moment happened for you, how you changed or how it affected how you started to do things differently or did it in your life.
Yeah, it completely changed because, uh, you know, I have a lot more compassion and empathy now because I need that to do this work, right? If I'm helping somebody and I don't have compassion and I don't have empathy, I'm not going to be able to move them, out of the space that they're in. And
Yeah.
so, that's what I always say to people. If you don't have compassion in your heart, you can't help anybody.
I think a lot of people sitting out there right now are listening to you and your, such powerful things that have happened in your life and how you've been able to, personally overcome them. If someone really is just so frustrated with the space they're in and they know they need to get healing happening for them and they want to get to that place where they can forgive whoever has abused them, and there's so much trauma involved and all these feelings and emotions that are trapped in the body, as you've said, I mean, where's a good place to start?
Well, like I said, it happened for me. I got on my hands and knees and, I just said, I can't do this anymore. I need help, right?
Yeah.
And I always say the day that I asked for help was the day that I saved my own life,
Mm.
you know? And
So would you say like people like even just to start, maybe people could get into like a prayer
yeah,
ritual or something like meditation ritual, like something.
yep,
I'm just trying to make it tangible for people out there who are
yep.
listening to just start something, just today to be able
Mhm.
to start doing something to help them start on that journey.
Yeah, when you get on your knees, that's showing humility too, right?
Yeah.
And you know, um, and I learned that in 12 step. I had this grizzly old AA sponsor. First thing he said to me, he says, "Get on your hands and knees tomorrow morning and pray."
Mm, I love that advice. I mean, in my own life too, I always say prayers of gratitude. Gratitude for me is like the prayers of gratitude
Yeah.
to God, whatever you believe in. I mean, I don't judge
Mm-hmm.
others. Like personally,
Yep.
I just have my prayers of gratitude to God every single day of my life. The moment that I made that a habit, a daily ritual of mine, my life changed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It's powerful.
it's really simple, basic stuff, but because there's so much stigma attached to prayer and meditation and yoga and all this stuff. That's part of the reason why, uh, we're so stuck with
Yeah.
helping people, with their mental illness that, you know, because, for example, every TV program is 24 minutes of actually the show, and the other 6 minutes are commercials. And half of those commercials are about big pharma,
Hmm.
that there's this magic pill you can take that's going to make all this problems and issues go away. Well, no, it's not,
No,
because,
it's a band-aid on a
you know,
bullet wound.
exactly. And so, when you say to somebody, like, just get on your knees and pray, they look at you like, what the fuck are you talking about? No, like,
Completely. It's like
seriously,
it's this
like,
woo woo kind of like, I mean, I even have to, I mean, clearly I don't mind discussing or diving deep in the woo woo, but yeah, for
yeah,
sure. There's like,
hmm,
there's still people that
yeah,
I try to almost forewarn, like, look, I'm all about the spiritual and it's going to get really woo woo sometimes, but
yeah,
like I I do believe that there's a balance in everything. And I think just as much as, science stuff is valid, so is spiritual. And I think the moment that whatever it looks like, and I think that's, again, going back to that toolbox, which you and I have our own toolboxes, a lot of similar tools. But if people can start to fill that toolbox with things that work for them, it's really just a matter of finding ways to connect to yourself deeper.
Yes, that's it.
Really?
That's it. Because at the end of the day, all you have is you.
Amen. Right? And that's the thing. That's not to say like you could have the best relationship in your life with a partner. You could have your kids, you could have your family. But I always say this, I always, always, always go back to, and this is where the whole life cheerleader concept came up. You ultimately only have yourself at the end of the day. And if things are not right with you, first off, there's no way you're going to be able to show up for anyone else fully. But more importantly, you're not going to be in your best state. Like, you have to start from the source, which is you.
And if you don't love yourself, guess what? You can't be in a relationship and love somebody else.
Amen. You can't pour from that empty cup. You can't pour from an empty cup. Like, it's just, that to me is such a simple saying, but it's so true.
Yeah. Well, that's why divorce rates are in the 60 percentile now, because you have all these traumatized people who think that by getting in a relationship with somebody else that person is going to save them or heal them or whatever it is. Well, no, it's not. It's just going to escalate, all of your traumas. And so, the man's trauma and the women's trauma end up becoming the core of what the relationship is all about.
Totally. And I mean, there is something to be said. I do believe relationships are the best mirrors to show you yourself, because there's things that you honestly just can't discover until you're with someone else. But that being said, if you're constantly finding yourself in these patterns of unhealthy relationships, chances are it's because you haven't healed the relationship with yourself enough to even be able to be in that union with somebody else.
So true.
I love it. I love this. Oh man, Theo, the vibe is flowing. I love it. I'm really curious because you're into so many things and you have so many talents and so many interests. What you're actually curious about right now in the world?
Well, I'm wondering why we gravitate towards traumatized leaders.
Okay. Ooh, I like this. Please dive into that more.
Why traumatized leaders have the most followers right now.
What is your philosophy on it, or your theory? Why do you think it is?
Well, it's a lack of personal power, right? And I think if, you look at Putin's story, you look at Trudeau's history, you look at Trump's history, Hillary Clinton's history, if you look at all of their histories, well, and especially as children, like their parents were never there for them.
Yeah.
Right. And so, now they become these big, powerful people, and now they want to control other people. Well, hurt people, right?
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what's transpiring here in the world, is that, there is no compassion, there is no empathy, it's all about power and greed. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's what it's all about. And tremendous egos.
I guess I really am curious then, because to me it's all about solutions. So if you're seeing these patterns, because it sounds like obviously you've looked into their childhoods, their past and whatnot, and just this philosophy of gravitating towards people who are hurting themselves. I mean, what does an ideal situation look like as a solution to you? Like, what would, if you could have things shift in a way right now, what would that look like to you?
Well, the thing about ego is if you're a person who leads with ego, what happens? Eventually everybody hates you.
Yeah.
Okay. Eventually everybody resents you, despises you, and hates you. But if you lead with compassion and empathy and
love,
all these love, and everybody's equal, the world has an incredible amount of abundance and that, we don't, uh, there's no reason why the world should be in the state that we're in, but because we have a bunch of traumatized leaders, this is exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, the psychology behind it really fascinates me as well.
Yeah, and nobody ever talks about this stuff.
No,
Nobody.
that's why it really
Nobody.
intrigued my interest when you said that, because most people, I mean, I've never, this certainly a first on Paper Paradise podcast, as far as when I ask people what they're curious about. And I love that you're so authentic and transparent in really what it is that you're feeling and thinking. And it's like you're very unfiltered. You're very composed, but very unfiltered in just sharing. And I love that about you, Theo.
Well, and ultimately, isn't that where we're supposed to be? Like
Yeah.
I'm tremendously flawed, tremendously flawed. But what I'm doing is I'm discovering why I'm tremendously flawed, so that I can change that. And you know, uh, being involved in the biggest epidemic on the planet, I have to figure out these things.
This is a day and time for sure. Like to really be able to tune into what your purpose is and to really be a leader, because there is so much fear and there's so much chaos going on, especially literal times in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to step into your personal power, would you say it would be a fair assessment to say that you literally, in order to really hone in on your power, you need to step into your pain first?
Yes, there is no question, but everybody is so afraid of what they look like, what they say, all that. I've never been one of those people, right? I don't know, for whatever reason, I just tell it like it is.
Yeah, you speak your
And,
truth.
I just wish more people were able to do that. Like, I'll tell you another amazing story.
Say it. I love your stories. Please share.
So, so we were doing a conference in Calgary, a 1 day healing conference. Kim and I were doing a healing conference. And, Kim is also incredibly vulnerable too. And so we created this amazing safe space in this conference. And so, we opened up the floor for people to either comment or have questions or whatever, right? So this guy stands up and he says, I just want everybody to know that I've never in my entire life felt this safe. And he said, I've been carrying a secret around for a very, very long time. And he said, I sexually abused my sister for 5 years. And what happened was there was 3 or 4 women who were in the audience who'd been abused by their brothers, who got up, walked over, and embraced this man.
Wow.
And so that's the kind of healing that needs to happen in the world.
Wow, that's a huge, powerful moment of forgiveness on so many levels.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so, you ask me why I get out of bed. Well, I get out of bed for that. I get out of bed for that,
yeah,
right?
that's
Because,
profound purpose. You're living on
okay,
purpose.
yeah, it's like if we don't get to that place, we're going to see more of the same.
Yeah. I think it would be a cool experiment right now, just because everyone's tuning in and what a candid, beautiful conversation we have flowing. Can you share something that you would consider yourself having failed at, Theo?
Oh, God, where do I start? you know, um, you know, uh,
Or and
well,
also with this this
I wouldn't call
question
it
that
I wouldn't call it
oh, you
failure.
called me on it, or I literally, you read my mind. I was going to
Yeah.
say, now, part of this question, usually, somehow, everyone I interview, you can also explain what the word failure even means to you, because it's a
Mm,
very different meaning to every person I ask.
yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say I haven't failed at anything because I'm not dead yet.
Mm.
I think we can continue learning until we stop breathing. And so maybe something that looked like failure to some people, I still have the opportunity to go back and repair that piece.
Absolutely. I look at it the same way. It's like I'm either winning or I'm learning. I don't really believe in the word failure. It's kind of a trick question, to be honest, but I'm always curious to see how people are going to react to that one. I love your philosophy.
I would think a lot of people get triggered by that word.
Yeah.
It's like, how many people get triggered by forgiveness?
Oh, yeah.
Right? But, whatever it means to you is whatever it means to you, right? I'm not here to judge. I'm here to guide and, use these stories that I have, right?
Yeah. Sharing your story is so powerful. I'm really wondering, because you're all about, I love that you said this in the beginning of our talk, retraining your brain. Is there a limiting belief that you currently have or had mindset-wise that you overcame? And can you talk a little bit about the mind component here?
Yeah, well, Kim told me almost from the first conversation that we had that I could rewire my brain. And I was like, wow, never even thought I could. And she said, yeah, I can teach you how to rewire your brain. And then I was like, okay, I'm all in.
You're like, I am not leaving her side for the rest of my life. That's a powerful thing to say to someone in a first conversation. I love that.
Well, basically, I snuck into a speaking engagement that she had because we were both speaking at the same conference, and I snuck into the back of the room, and as soon as she was done speaking, I went up to her and I said, hey, you just changed my life. And I said, I think you'll be working with me for the rest of yours, I said to her. And, that has come to fruition. And, we all have a list of 2 to 5 people that, are on speed dial when we're struggling.
Yeah.
And she's one of those people, right?
That's amazing.
I'm designing a coaching program right now where, I'm going to move my platform online. And
what better time than during a quarantine, Theo?
Exactly. Exactly. And so, one of the bullet points is, you got to have 2 to 5 friends where, when you're struggling, you absolutely have to pick up the phone and call one of those people every single day.
Oh, amen. That is such a
to check in.
Yeah. That's such an amazing, right? I always say you are who you surround yourself with. Whether you want to deny that or not, you end up becoming who you surround yourself with. And you need to have your own little, yes, I'm going to speak from my own personal experience. I am a life cheerleader, so many like you are as well, but I have my own little pack of cheerleaders behind me too.
Yep. Yeah. And those people, you don't want people that co-sign your bullshit.
Right?
You want people that call you out.
Yeah. You want the people who are going to tell you the straight up, you don't even care if you like it or not, bare bones truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, if you sit, what I always say is addicts and alcoholics are really good at collecting enablers. We collect them.
Yeah, for sure.
And so the more enablers we have, the longer our behavior can last, right? But eventually we make all the enablers sick, right? And then the enablers have to go away and take care of themselves, which then we are left.
It's a no-win situation. This is why I did my second podcast on boundaries. That's what is necessary. You need people, these cheerleaders that I think you and I are talking about, these 2 to 5 people, which again, I think is an amazing element for you to have in your new coaching program. I think it's such a simple yet profound way to change your life. When you have these kind of people who are not willing to put up with your BS and who are only willing to tell you the straight up truth, but they also are those people in your life
who will have their own set of boundaries to go, you know what, I'm not going to put up with you if you're going to treat me like this, because ultimately that teaches you to also have to have personal boundaries as well.
Yeah. And, you know, my friends are guys that we can go on a 1 hour long walk and not say one word to each other.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just got to be.
Completely.
Right? You don't always have to, you know, be flapping your gums, you know? And, you know, my friends are guys that, you know, we don't necessarily talk all the time, but, you know, when I do pick up the phone and call, they're always on the other end. And that's, to me, what true friendship is all about.
Oh, I love that you shared that. I really love that you shared that.
Is that they don't get butthurt if they don't hear from me for a while.
And yeah, you always have to pay respect. And I always say the gratitude, again, going back to the prayers of gratitude, you always have to give gratitude for those people who are there for you. And most of the time you find out who your true, you know, friends or people are in your life when you're not going through your, you know, unicorn, fairy, happy times. It's the people that are really stepping up for you when you're in your lowest of lows. That's, in my experience anyways, that's who you really see. It's not about like, you know, prove to me you're my good friend, but it's just, in my life, I value the people who have shown me time and time again that no matter what kind of Mandy I am that day, they're always going to be there for me.
Heal in relationship, right? That's why I call myself a relationship trauma or relationship expert, is because I was hurt in relationship, and how am I going to heal in relationship? Yeah.
Full circle. I like to say I'm a big writer and a proponent of quotes, and I love writing quotes. And one that came to me, and I think you'll truly resonate with this one, Theo, is we're all just wounded children walking around trying to adult.
And trauma is the string which binds us all together.
Absolutely. I mean, really. And that's why I think I've come to a place of compassion for every person I cross paths with, because ultimately, I don't know that anyone is really void of any sort of trauma, especially in the younger years. It's very rare to come across anymore that I've seen nowadays.
I did a TED Talk in Vancouver, and
experienced that.
You know, I'm going to qualify every single person in the room as trauma survivors by saying, if you have parents, you've experienced trauma in your life. And that, and
that is such a powerful statement. Wow.
Blaming anybody, because we're doing the best we can with what we have, right? And if we knew better, we'd do better.
Yes.
But, you know, nobody's immune from experiencing trauma. We're all going to experience it at some point in our life, right?
Completely. So it's just a matter of, and that's what I say, everyone's on their, you know, it's just the only difference between one person and the next is how far along they are in their healing process. Really.
Suffering, right? And so emotional pain and suffering, what's that called? It's called mental health. Okay. And so how do we deal with this emotional pain that's left behind from the trauma? Well, we tend to gravitate towards the dark side of life, and we get involved in addictions, because it's a coping mechanism and a numbing agent for our emotional pain and suffering. But eventually, we come to that place where we got to make a choice.
Completely.
Decision. Am I going to die, or am I going to live? And I would say the majority of people want to live. And so if you want to live, well, then you got to go down that path of healing.
What would you recommend for people out there who are like, oh man, like I'm so resonating with you, Theo? What kind of support or resources are available, whether it's your personal recommendations, and feel free to plug your stuff right now, or other support or resources that people can turn to literally like after they finish listening to our podcast therapy, together.
Which I told you earlier, because I think the therapeutic world has sort of priced themselves out of the market. And so, you know, I would always suggest find a group of people that, you know, you can go and hang out with on a once a month or twice a month or whatever, because, you know, the biggest thing that trauma leaves us with is it leaves us with this feeling of being alone in our pain and suffering, right? And so the best thing you can do is plug yourself into a group of people.
Plug yourself into a group of people.
You guys meet once a month and you sit down and you throw it out there. And that costs nothing. What's a cup of coffee? $2.50? Not $250 like it costs to go see a professional, and then, immerse yourself and just find, use the prayer stuff, use the meditation stuff, use the breathing exercises, use the yoga classes, the exercise, go to the gym, all of these things that don't necessarily are going to break you, financially. Yeah. Because nobody just
taking care of you in body, mind, and spirit
really well. Right.
Yeah. I could see how and that's the thing, so many people turn to either externals or they actually, they distract themselves or even make other people the addiction. So I know we talked a lot about friendship. I'm really wondering what your thoughts are on what a successful relationship looks like to you at this point in your life.
One void of conflict, one that's void of drama. Compassion, empathy, forgiveness, all of these things, I just think that when you find your higher being or your higher, write it down, right? Write down what does my ultimate relationship look like? And then you're putting that out to the universe. Right? And the universe always will come back with an answer, especially if you're awake. We're not awake. Stuff just keeps going by us and by us and by us, and that lesson just keeps coming and coming and coming. And
that's an amazing exercise for people to do out there. I honestly think everyone should at some point, and I've done this myself in the past, written down a list, and it's not so much as, it doesn't have to be, some people can write, 5 pages of these specific items they want in a partner. I'm not saying to go overboard like that. Mind you, if you want to, great. But I think it's important more than anything, what you just described. I think it's kind of the negotiables and non-negotiables, because ultimately those are like your boundaries, right?
Because everybody's flawed.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's
flawed. And so, what are you willing to put up with and what are you willing not to put up with?
Completely. Okay, Theo, we've gone over so much and I love the way this is flowing. I'm going to get into quickie time now. If you had to recommend one book, obviously aside from yours, that could positively change someone's life, what book would it be?
One book. The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. I used it in one of my early therapy
and why that
sessions
one?
When I was early in the process, and there was some profound things that really made sense to me. It was all about getting to the place of living in the now, as opposed to what do they say? They say living or thinking about the past is depression, and thinking about the future is anxiety. And so if I live in the now, then I'm eliminating depression.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. And I'm a huge fan of the book too. And I love that you brought that up, especially today of all days. I think a lot of people could benefit from that philosophy. What profession other than your own? So let's just go with, the coaching at this point.
I'd love to be
if you were not doing coaching, what other profession would you attempt?
That's my meditation.
Really?
My meditation.
Golfing. That's I think there's a lot of people out there who'd resonate with that answer. Now, Theo, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very normal and 10 being like full-blown unicorn.
Oh, geez, I'm probably
how weird are
7.
you?
Mm-hmm. And I'm staring at a unicorn right now.
How fitting. If you could have lunch with one person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Yeah, but no,
so you're really into the golf. I love it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I operate in the same way. On the sentimental side, I've been asked this question too in interviews or things, and there's definitely my sentimental answer, and then I go full throttle to the other end of like healing and self-progression and all that stuff. So that's really interesting you said that. Do you have any guilty pleasures?
Well, golf shoes.
Oh, do you have a
Hmm.
collection?
Oh yeah, I probably have a hundred pair.
What?
Hmm.
Theo, you have over
And
100 pairs of golf
and an
shoes.
outfit to match every single
Wow. Okay,
pair.
yeah, that's definitely a guilty pleasure. What
Hmm.
do you just have a
Yeah, I have one
golf
section of my
fashion
closet that
closet
is
in your home?
all golf clothes. Hmm.
Wow, I love that. Oh my goodness. That's a first again on paper. I've never had anyone answer with that. And if you could
Italian.
only eat one food for the rest of your life,
Mm,
what would it
mm,
be? Italian food. Do you have like a favorite dish?
chicken
It's
parm.
chicken parm. Oh, amazing. Italian seems to be a popular answer. Most people say something, whether it's pizza,
Comfort
pasta,
food.
or, something in that realm. It's kind of funny to see all the pattern. All right, now winding it down, what's something that you're most excited
This whole
about coming
coaching
up
thing
for
going
you?
online. I think I'll be able to touch and have an impact on more people.
And do you want to share a little
Yeah,
bit more
so
about that for people who
basically,
are interested in that, who are listening?
it's a 5-step process to overcome trauma. And so I will take you through the process of, these 5 steps that'll get you to, a place where, you do have compassion and, all of these things, forgiveness will go down that road, and then we'll set up a plan for you for, your daily routine that helps you, manage, whatever it is you're feeling or going through.
For everyone listening out there, I'll put a link below in the show notes.
Thinking beginning of May will be when it's ready. So,
I'll put the link to your website regardless, because I know you have your
yeah,
books and there's a number of things people can take away as far as resources. And depending on when someone's tuning into this interview that we're doing now, they'll it's past that time when you've launched things that
I
they
got a
can
whole
pick up
bunch of
from you,
videos on
correct?
YouTube, and our website's very interactive and great. So yeah, there's lots of, and I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those things. So, I'm always around. So if somebody is, desperately needing help immediately, reach out and I will get back to you probably ASAP.
Oh, I love that about you. No matter what you experience or what you accomplish in your life, Theo, you're just so down to earth. And I love that you have no really, I mean, the word would be ego about yourself. And I really, really respect that about you. I'm very curious because this is Pave Your Paradise podcast. What does paradise mean to you? How would you personally
The
define the word
relationship I have
paradise?
with myself. Well, I just
Aw,
think
do you want to
when
go into
you're
that or like just leave it
comfortable
at
in your
that?
own skin, because I was never comfortable in my own skin. Um, now that I'm comfortable in my own skin, like I said, the world is my oyster. I've been able to have the biggest impact on, the subject in which I'm dealing with on a daily basis because I decided to have a relationship with myself. And if I didn't go down that road, I would be still drinking. I would, you know, I think, I would have died a bitter, lonely, desperate old man, bitter, angry, frustrated, so, yeah.
And you chose not to. You chose to rise above. And now you're a leader in this world and a light to so many. And I guess I wonder, how can I and the audience, the listeners, serve you? You're such a proponent of giving back and serving the communities that
Just
you
find your
visit.
voice,
How can we
use your
help you in
voice,
the highest way, Theo?
don't be silent. Don't, I on my travels, all I see is pain and suffering. And I truly believe that that is unnecessary. And so, I always tell people, find your voice, tell your story. It's your story. You get to tell it whatever way you want, and I really believe that the first step in the process is finding your voice and saying, hey, I was raped 150 times by my coach. And, I watched my parents fight and argue and scream at each other 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, you know. And what I realized is that I'm not the only person in the world who hasn't experienced rape, and I have experienced, you know, parents who are struggling with, you know, their own shit. So, you know, use your voice. And when you do, you know, that's the first step in the process.
Thank you so much for that. And the best place to find you to learn more about you and what you do, TheoFleury.life.
I'm at Theo Fleury 14 on all platforms. Yeah.
Amazing. Theo, I and everyone listening, I'm sure, feels so much gratitude, and we are pouring so much love and light into you right now for being on the podcast, for sharing your personal journey and story of tragedy, basically, to triumph. And I just personally want to say, you know, I learned so much in just hearing you share your story. So I'm going to invite everyone listening out there, you know, even if it's a little bit of something you've been holding on to, please follow in Theo's suit and maybe share with somebody else today. You know, try to make someone else's day first off with that intentionality that you have, Theo, which I love. Just change someone's day for in a positive way, and also just share a piece of yourself.
You do that, you know, the world will be a better place.
Well, you've made my world and everyone listening today, their world, a better place. Thank you so much, Theo.
Great. Okay. Awesome.
Thanks so much for joining me. If there's anyone you know who you think could benefit from hearing today's episode, it would mean the world if you'd share it with them. Love what you heard? Then please subscribe. If you really love what you heard, then please leave a review with your honest and loving thoughts. This podcast wouldn't be possible without your support. If you feel called to, please make contributions to my podcast fund that helps me to keep it going strong, bringing on amazing guests for you, and to continue the ripple effect of spreading goodness in the world. I appreciate you, your time, and your energy, and I love hearing from you, so drop me a line on social media. As always, I'm wishing you a positive day and your own piece of paradise. Until next time, sending you love and light, and keep shining.